but it's really nice. All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome to LinkedIn Late Night Art Live. I'm Adam Rosendahl. I'm the founder of the Late Night Art Method, which is an organization that breaks down barriers and builds trust and connection and collaboration with leaders and teams through arts-based experiences. I am so excited to have you here, Carole Robin. Carole taught the legendary course Interpersonal Dynamics at the Stanford Graduate School of Business for over 17 years, which has been affectionately nicknamed Touchy Feely. She's also the co-founder of Leaders in Tech and the co-author of this amazing book, which is called Connect. So Carole, welcome.
Thank you, Adam. So delighted to be here.
Yeah, and I mentioned to you that it's so cool, but my mom has known Mary Ann Huckabee for my whole life, who is really deeply involved in the Interpersonal Dynamics program. And so I was hearing about T Group and the work that you all are doing since I was a kid. So I feel like this work this conversation's been in my DNA for a little while.
Yeah, that's really, and of course, Mary Ann Huckabee was one of my mentors. I learned a lot of what I know about being interpersonally competent and teaching interpersonal dynamics from Mary Ann.
I love it. Yeah. So we're also here with April Jones and Alana Pura, who are behind the scenes helping make this happen. So thank you all. So for everyone who's tuning in from around the world, just inviting you to share the city that you're logging in from. Just would be curious to see where people are coming from. So go ahead and drop that in the chat. And while you're doing that, Carole, we met last year at the Responsive Conference, which is organized by Robin Zander, who I actually went to middle school and high school with. So the connections keep flowing. Yeah. And something I really loved, your keynote was the highlight of the conference for me, but something I really remember was you had us turn to a partner in the audience and to take a risk and to invite us to drop in 15% deeper than we would usually go with that person. And that's something that really stuck out to me.
I'm delighted.
And I still remember what my partner shared. Yeah.
Do you remember what you shared?
Yeah, when you invited us to go a little deeper. I'm not sure I'm comfortable sharing it right now in front of the group, but yeah.
Oh, no, I wasn't. I wasn't trying to ask you to do that. I was just, confirming that when we take a little risk like that and we heighten our awareness, then we remember both what the other person said and what we said. We're more likely to remember both.
It's amazing how everything else kind of fades away, but those moments are the things that I remember.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So we got Brooklyn, San Francisco, Austin, Todos Santos, Baja. What's up, Daniel, who also went to high school with me and Robin Zander. My mom calling in from Richmond, California. Near calling in from Madrid.
Wow.
Calling in from Argentina. Valerie from Michigan. So cool. Welcome, everyone. Love it. So every month I draw somebody who is really inspiring me, who I see as a leader who's pushing boundaries and bringing connection and creativity into the workplace. So Alana, would you pop up this drawing that I did of Carole? This is a drawing that I did after seeing your talk at Responsive and then reading Connect. And one of the concepts that still really sticks out to me that I think about a lot is just so simple, but how might we share just 15% deeper? So I'm just curious if you would share a little bit about the history of that, or how that concept came to be. Yeah.
So by way of context, one of the things that we encourage students at Stanford and now participants at Leaders in Tech to do is to allow themselves to be better known. It doesn't mean I'm going to tell you everything about me, but somewhere between the spun image to present with and everything you might ever want to know about me, there's a lot of gray. And so the idea is that in order to deepen a relationship in a way that's manageable for both people, there's what we might call our comfort zone, which is the stuff we say and talk about that we don't even think twice about. Then, think of 3 concentric circles, and that's the circle in the middle. Then there's a circle on the very outside, which is what we call the danger zone. In a million years, I would never tell you that. But there's a circle in the middle between the these two, which we call the zone of learning. This comes from educational research, by the way. And we have to step outside our comfort zone to learn something new, including something new about each other and ourselves.
Yeah.
We have to stay inside our danger zone, or we get too freaked out, or we freak the other person out. So,
yeah.
So when we used to introduce this concept, my students used to say, but Carole, how do I know the minute I step outside my comfort zone, how do I know that I'm staying in my learning zone? I haven't gotten into danger. And so we came up with, well, why don't you think of stepping a little bit outside your comfort zone, 15%. And then an interesting thing happens, because I step 15% outside, you're more likely to step 15% outside your comfort zone. We now have a new redrawn, slightly larger comfort zone with each other. Then we can go 15% beyond that. And that's how we grow and deepen a relationship.
I love it. It's so accessible, because I've heard about the stretch zone, learning zone, panic zone, like my whole life since I was a kid. And I like the idea, but I think the 15% just feels so accessible for me.
Exactly.
Yeah. Whereas like the idea of stepping outside my comfort zone, can sometimes feel a little amorphous. So yeah,
absolutely.
That's something I think about a lot. So the subtitle of your book is Building Exceptional Relationships with Building Exceptional Relationships with Family, Friends, and Colleagues. And I'm just curious how you define this word exceptional.
Oh, yeah. So we debated about this a lot. So the word exceptional comes from our analysis of what happened in these. This is my co-author, David Bradford, and I. And we looked at, in his case, multiple decades of experience with T groups and touchy feely. In my case, 17 years. And we looked at what is it that happens in these T groups and that make them so special and so memorable. And, you know, the students talk about it was worth the entire price of tuition. And one of the conclusions we drew and in talking to participants was, well, something exceptional happens.
Yeah.
We end up in these exceptional relationships. And so we started to break that down. Like, what does that exactly mean? And so there's really kind of 6 components to what we define as exceptional. But before I go there, I think it's important to note that relationships exist on a continuum. And at one end of the continuum, there's contact and no connection. Those are your thousands of Facebook friends. Mm-hmm. Also at that end is dysfunction. At the other end of the continuum is what we came to define as exceptional. But along the way on the continuum, there's robust and functional. And the skills and competencies you need to move along the continuum take you to at least robust and functional. And you can stop there. And there's only a few people you might want to invest the energy and the time and the commitment to get all the way to exceptional with. But there's no reason why you shouldn't get to at least robust and functional with anybody you want to have a relationship with. Yeah. So that's a little bit of context and background to this whole exceptional. Let me pause. You look like you have a question.
Well, no, it's so powerful. Like, because I think of myself as someone who has pretty deep relationships with my friends and my colleagues, and I pride myself on that. And I really try to encourage other people to drop in deeper. But exceptional, like that's a new bar. And like when I was reading your book, I was thinking, how can I push myself more to actually, you know, when you talk about some relationships plateau. So we might have a deep relationship with somebody, but at a certain point, it kind of becomes flatline. And so how do we keep growing? And I think that's something that you've really inspired me to think more about, like, how can I keep pushing and growing? Because, you know, it's aspirational when you talk about these exceptional relationships where we're continuing to ask for feedback and really exploring like what's real now between us.
What I love about what you just said is the word growth. One of the hallmarks of a relationship that is moved along the continuum, even to robust and functional, but definitely to exceptional, is that we're both invested in each other's growth. And that doesn't just mean keeping it real with you and giving you feedback. It also means keeping it real with myself and also being willing to stretch outside my comfort zone, both in terms of disclosure and in terms of the things that I tell you with regard to the impact that your behaviors are having on me, which in turn help you be more interpersonally competent and effective with anybody in your life.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's an investment.
Yeah. And of course, it's like, it needs to be mutual. Like when one person's trying to go super deep and the other person's a little not ready for it, it doesn't work that way. And
yeah, and like we have, you've read the book, but what, for the purposes of and benefit of those who are listening and watching, the concepts are really portrayed and taught through the stories of multiple relationships in the book that are an amalgamation of relationships. None of them are true people, but they're amalgamations of people that David and I have known and knew. And there's one particular pair of buddies, two men, where one of them, and they have progressed their relationship to a certain point, and then one of them just really wants to go deeper, and the other one kind of doesn't. They're done. And now, what do you do in those situations? And we use the analogy and the metaphor of climbing a mountain together, and the fact that you start at the foothills and you climb together and you get to an upper meadow, which is beautiful and pleasant, and you can have a picnic and a couple of glasses of wine and kind of hang out there. But there is a summit. In a lot of cases, the meadow is just fine, but there are some where you think, wow, let's try to get to the summit together, because it's just going to be like that much more remarkable. And so that's the idea behind exceptional. It's climbing to the summit together.
yeah, and of course, you're not going to do that with everyone. It's like
exactly. It's not
a couple people, maybe you want a couple people at work, or one even, and like a couple people in your life.
Precisely, because it's not practical and it's unnecessary, frankly. But well, and I don't like the word but. It sort of denies everything you said before the but. And not only is it impractical and unnecessary, the flip side of that is that I think in order to have a really meaningful life experience, it's important to have that kind of a relationship with at least one, maybe a couple, maybe two or three. Otherwise, life just is kind of lived in black and white instead of full living color.
Yeah. And I think people think and strive to have that with their romantic partner, but to cultivate that level of relationship with a colleague or a friend,
or a really good friend,
feels like an important aspect to bringing more depth to life and more self-awareness, right? So I know that Gallup has a ton of research around when you have a best friend at work, people are more engaged and productive, and they have less sick days and all this. Like, how would you think about developing an exceptional relationship at work? Because there's also just so many dynamics that I think are at play when people are thinking of going on to that level of depth with each other.
Yeah. So there's definitely more challenges in a work situation, particularly a work situation where I experience myself as being in competition, whether it's a competition for promotion, or in competition for attention, or in competition for resources, or in competition, so that adds complexity to it. But let's go back to what makes a relationship exceptional. The first is that we're both willing to be more known to each other. Hang on just a second. I'm sorry for the background noise. Let me just wait a second until it's done.
Real life.
My apologies. Working from home.
The trials and tribulations of working from home. Yes.
If you really must know, my husband is filling a thermos with ice so that he can go fill it with water and then go golfing. So now you know me and my life situation a little bit better.
All right.
So back to what makes a relationship exceptional, and in a work situation, it's no different. First, we're more willing to allow ourselves to be known by each other, and that means we trust each other. and we trust that what we tell each other won't be used against us. We're also willing to be honest with each other. And so I'm willing to tell you when you've done something that either weakened our relationship or I observe you doing that I think might be not in your best interest, rather than stay silent. Silence is collusion often. We deal with conflict productively rather than run away from it. And we are invested in each other's growth, which I already talked about. And when you have all of those elements in a relationship, the deeper you've gone into each of those, the more you've moved along that continuum of exceptional. And there's no reason why you can't do that with somebody at work. But there are many more people where you're going to have to be more thoughtful, perhaps, and strategic with regard to who you're going to do that with, particularly if you're afraid that they might use the relationship in some way against you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it kind of makes me think about just the grounds for building psychological safety. And there's like a lot of people talk a lot about it, but when you see somebody who truly is creating a space, a leader who's creating a space that is inviting feedback, exactly, and knowing that it won't be weaponized or used against people, like it's a beautiful thing when you see like that lack of ego or defensiveness to completely unearth all of the conflict, all of the different opinions, all of the different stuff.
And you know, in the end, and I say, you've heard me say this before, anybody who's ever heard me speak has heard me say this: people do business with people.
Yeah.
They don't do business with ideas or strategies or products or money. They do business with people. So the reason this course is so legendary and in the most oversubscribed to course at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, not hidden away in some psych department, is that people do business with people. So getting the people part right is I'd say about the most important thing.
Yes. Yeah. And I remember I listened to another podcast and there was like a funny moment with you where interviewer said, like, it's so funny that this is the most popular course at Stanford Graduate School of Business because it's not about business. And you said something like, I don't know if you've been listening to anything I'm saying, because like the people work, the interpersonal development is all about business. That is business.
That is business.
Like, why do we trust somebody to buy something, anything? Mm-hmm.
But we've been socialized in business to ignore the people part a lot.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's kind of an old mental model, but it's an existing mental model in a lot of places where the task is what matters and the relationship is secondary. And you know, that got even worse during the pandemic, and it got even worse as we've gone to, you know, Zoom and where the task becomes even more foregrounded and the relationship becomes even more background.
Yeah.
To the detriment of strong relationships and better work conditions.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, this is so like the work that I am swimming in and like have so much belief in, like having the foundation of good relationships that the business comes after, especially with leaders building that with their teams and building that kind of trust and connection. So I recently was leading an offsite and there was 200 leaders in the room and they're from 20 different countries. And after this 2-hour session, which I thought went very well and had a lot of people, like a lot of buzz happening, we're all sitting down to have lunch afterward. I ended up sitting across from this woman who's from Munich, and turns out to be one of the senior leaders in the room. And I said, how was the session for you? And she said, honestly, Adam, I hated it because I do not share about my personal life at work. And I have no interest in having my colleagues become my friends. And I was shocked at her honesty, but it was also became a really interesting dialogue. And I'm just kind of curious what you would provide as perspective to there is, I'd say, you know, like that in some ways she was like, I'm German and this is how, you know,
countercultural.
Like, yeah. This is like just how we do it. We have like a strong separation, but I'm curious how you would kind of respond to people that are in that camp of like the total separation.
Well, I think extremes generally don't serve us.
Yeah.
And in some ways, we're back to 15%, somewhere between, sharing your deepest, darkest secrets with somebody and not letting them know anything about you. There's a lot of in between. And there's a cost to be paid when you don't share anything. What you do essentially is you present a blank screen to somebody. And when you present a blank screen, you give them an opportunity to project anything they want onto that screen. And usually what they project isn't good. So,
Sure.
a Carolean principle, because my name is Carole with an E, a Carolean principle is in the absence of data, people will make, and pardon the language, shit up.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want people to make stuff up about you. Fill in the blanks for them, or they will fill them in, because people don't like not understanding. So you'll have more control over your self-definition if you give people a little bit more to work with than if you give them nothing. That's what I would have told that woman.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea of like when you say, why would someone follow you? Like for leaders, like we need to give people information about what's going on under the surface, and also what does it actually take to build trust with people.
Yes.
Over time.
And there is what I might call appropriate authenticity.
Of course.
So, if I'm the VP of marketing and we've lost share 3 months in a row, I'm not going to stand up in front of everybody and say we're crushing it, because that is going to result in a total loss of credibility. But I'm also not going to stand up in front of everybody and say, well, no secret, we've lost share for 3 months. I have no idea what we should do about it. I'm feeling really crappy, and I'm not sure I should be your VP of marketing. Well, I don't think that's what we're saying either. But I can stand up in front of everybody and say, okay, we've lost share for 3 months. I wish I had all the answers for you. I don't. I've got some ideas. I'm sure all of you have some ideas, maybe even better ideas than I do. So let's, I want to hear. Now, which is the leader of those 3 leaders that you'd prefer to follow?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, the realness is, I think, always wins in terms of, like building a sense of trust and, actually following somebody.
Right.
I loved what we were talking about earlier around just the cross-cultural nature of this work. And you were saying like the course could have been called Connecting Across Difference. Maybe you could just talk a little bit more about like the interpersonal dynamics work and how you've seen it as it's grown more globally and connecting across cultures. Because some people might stereotype this as like woo-woo or a California thing. And obviously like this work is global, and this is such an important part of it. Is like, and across difference.
I'm glad you asked me that question, because 40% of the students who took this course, because that's reflective of the percentage of students at the business school, maybe even a higher percentage took the course, were international.
Mm-hmm.
Now the course, some of the concepts can sound very Americentric.
Mm-hmm.
But the bottom line was that all of those students from all those different countries had the same experience in the end, which was like, oh my gosh, who knew that you could develop relationships like this with people who initially my impression would be you'd never understand me. You have no idea what my life experience is. You have no idea about the norms that I've been raised with or grew up in. And, we're just going to have to acknowledge that we'll never really understand each other. Well, let's get back to why the students call the class Touchy Feely. Emphasis on the feely, not the touchy, I often say.
Mm-hmm.
So feelings are universal. Every human being experiences emotions, and anger is anger, and hurt is hurt, and joy is joy. And feelings are either connecting or they are distancing. So the more I engage in conversations that include how I'm feeling, for example, I was feeling embarrassed when my husband decided to load his thermoses in the middle of our conversation. I was feeling embarrassed. I was feeling a little bit annoyed, but then I was also feeling guilty because I should have known that he was going to need to do that. And I should have made the extra effort to go over to my office and do this from my office. And so I was feeling a lot of things in that
Mhm.
moment. Now you know me a little bit better. I didn't plan well enough to make it to my office before this. I figured it was no problem to do it at home. And then it became a small problem. So that the fact, back to your question, we can relate to each other on the basis of feelings. Now, what causes those feelings might be vastly different. So if I'm angry, and you can relate to anger. Or let's stick with hurt for a moment. If I'm hurt, you know the experience of hurt or sadness. Now, what makes me sad or hurt me might be very different than what would make you sad and hurt you. But that's not the level at which we're connecting. We're connecting at the level of sadness. So you can actually meet me emotionally, not at the level of the cause, but at the level of the emotion, and that will bring us closer.
Yeah. And I'm what it's bring up for me right now is I think about art and creativity and music as these beautiful cross-cultural languages that
Exactly.
everybody has an understanding and is able to drop into. And I think of the feelings, the world of feelings that you're describing also as another one of these
That's
cross-cultural
wonderful.
languages.
That's a
And it's just,
wonderful comparison, and it really drives the point home.
yeah.
And we
I know
and
we
we
I know we
Oh,
only
I'm
have a
sorry.
couple minutes, so I just
Okay.
wanted to like allow people to type some questions in the chat.
Sure, sure.
If just anything that is coming up for you that's landing, so we can just invite a couple voices in the room. So Anjali, all right, I found that truth and timing definitely go hand in hand. How do you get consent for deeper conversations, sometimes difficult ones, without sounding like a therapist or a coach? Love it.
I usually lead with my intent. So I've got something that I've been sitting with, and I want to make sure that we give it enough space and time to talk about. I'm wondering if this is a good time, and if it's not, it's fine. I just want to kind of put a pin in it and figure out when might be a good time. I do some version of asking for permission or signaling, um, and then I sometimes will lead with what I'm hoping the outcome of this conversation is, and I fill in the blank before I dive in, because then I've made myself a little bit more vulnerable in putting out my needs. But then I'll also add, and I don't want this to be all about me.
Of course. Yeah. And it's interesting when so many so many of my friends are therapists and coaches. Like there is like a little bit of a boundary line of like when people get into therapizing others. Yeah.
I'll tell you one of the things that leads to that. Therapizing often involves the question, why? If you're really curious about knowing someone else, stay away from the word why, because why leads people into armchair psychology or justification. Stick with
Yeah.
what is that about? When does that manifest? Where is it happening most? What do you hope?
Absolutely.
Stay away from why.
Is there a few more questions that if folks want to pop in the chat, things that are coming up for you? Jamie, all right, coming in from Castro in San Francisco. Naming and connecting on the level of emotions and feelings and sensations in the body and not the story. I've heard this in Buddhist spaces. Helpful to hear it too. Meeting on the level of sadness.
Yeah. Because you know what? If I'm willing to express sadness, you will feel closer to me. That's what the research would show. I did mention that some emotions can be distancing. Anger can be a distancing emotion. It doesn't mean you should never express anger, but you should know that initially expressing anger will distance someone else. But underneath anger, and this is such an important point, anger is a secondary emotion. Often underneath anger, there is sadness, or there is hurt, or there is fear. So if you can get underneath to the primary emotion underneath anger, then you'll connect.
Yeah. Yeah, I often find like people who are at conferences who are walking around with like sharing their accolades, like it's not really the thing that actually helps people connect, right? It's like when people share their mishaps and their failures and these
Yeah,
little like the kind of underside of the mask is like what allows for people to really drop in.
exactly.
Um, I wanted to just get really practical for people that are thinking like, how can I apply this, or what's the next step, or like this week, like how can I like take a couple steps towards building more exceptional relationships? I'm curious, like if there's like a doable action or something that you would as homework for us.
One thing you can do is you can go to the book website, www.connectandrelate.com, and go to activities and download the free assessment and take an assessment and give it to take the assessment, give it to a few people in your life, and compare the results in terms of how you see yourself in terms of being interpersonally competent and how others see you. And then set some goals for yourself if there are some differences between those analyses. The second, of course, is go to the website and watch a few of the podcasts. Get the book. The book is available. It's now sold 170,000 copies.
So good.
And it's available in audio. It's available on Kindle. It's obviously available as a hardback. And it's been translated into 15 languages. So if you're calling in from one of 15 countries, I won't list them all. It's possible you can find it in your own native tongue. But if you're going to do one thing, pick a person in your life that you'd like a better relationship with, and step 15% outside your comfort zone with them. Just experiment, and then reflect on what you learned in the experiment. And even if it's somebody you already feel close to, don't start with the person you feel most distant from and you have the hardest relationship with. But note how there is every interaction with another human being is an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to learn something about yourself. It's an opportunity to learn something about them. And it's an opportunity to learn about interpersonal dynamics.
Beautiful. I think we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Carole. And I love that last advice just around what's one person that you want to develop an exceptional relationship with, and start there. So I hope that this inspires other folks who are listening to go out and deepen their relationships, because I think that's going to be part of healing the world, honestly.
Likewise.
Yes.
Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, Carole Robin, LLC. And
oh yeah, and the last thing, we're going to just pop in the chat, I think a link to the book and a link to a resource that we have within Late Night Art to help people build more connection and creativity in the workplace for leaders. And I think that's all. So thank you, everyone who's joining us from all over the world. We'll see you next time, and talk to you soon, Carole.
Thank you, Adam. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely.